Hi there, this is John Burrow from MammothInteractive.com, and let's talk a little bit about what you need for Xamarin Studio here and what you can expect in this course. So first things first, Xamarin is a program where you get to build iOS and Android courses in the same program. Now, while that sounds incredibly awesome, I just want to make sure there's a couple things up front that we kind of work through before you guys get any ideas on what that exactly means. So first things first, you need to download Xamarin, and you can simply just Google Xamarin and you can kind of download the links here. You can set them up. You also need Visual Studio Express, so I just Googled it and it came up with this here. Now we're using the Mac version of Xamarin, and the reason is that screencasting on a Mac is actually quite a bit more efficient because of the Retina display. So you actually get quite a bit more clarity on a Mac than a PC, as Windows 10 currently doesn't have a lot of good Retina support. So that's why we're using a Mac for this, is mostly for visual purposes. Now, believe it or not, you can use both of these to do that here. Just keep in mind though that we are on the Mac version for video purposes. Okay, so one thing about Xamarin is that you get to use C Sharp. Now, I've been using C Sharp for probably 7-8 years, and it's an amazing language. I love using it. It's great. And all of your apps that you'll be making with Xamarin can use C Sharp. And this is interesting because if you go into iOS, you have to use Objective-C or Swift. And if you go into Android, you have to use Java. So what Xamarin does is it creates the platform where you get to use the same programming language for both. So if you want to make a cross-platform app, Xamarin is a great way to do that. Now, having said that, Android and iOS are completely different in terms of visual elements. Now, this is going to be really important because if you set up, let's say, a simple app where you have a label and a button that changes that label, they are going to be different in Android and iOS. They're just going to be different because they are different UI elements. Now, there is some similarity here. So let's say if you wanted to make an app a simple app, just for instance, where you change the label with the press of a button. The way that it works in Xamarin is that you set up each individual the UI elements for both, and then you can go and make a third file that will change it that both of those read. So where the power comes in with Xamarin is that you can do some of the back-end work with one file versus literally going into Xcode or Android Studio and making two different apps. Now, it is quite powerful because you can do that. But having said that, you do have to set up UI elements for the most part separate apps. And what you want to do is you want to make simple looking apps. Even if you look at the apps here, they tend to be fairly simple. If you look at the top here, there's essentially a label, and then you have, one item, and then, another item here. Mobile design is inherently minimalist, and you always want to do that. It doesn't matter if you're working with just Xcode or just Android Studio. The simpler it is, the better. There has been a lot of money that has been poured into user experience, and that's essentially what they found. Simpler, better. And it's great because you have to code less too. So think minimalist, and if anything, you want to put more code into the back end. Now, having said that, there are times where it's very hard, if not impossible, to do that, where you go and you say and you actually put in the back end of code. And you'll see this in this tutorial series where there are certain UI elements that are hard, if not impossible, to use back end code. And there can be a way, but in some cases, not all cases, you do literally have to make the same app. Now, even though that sounds like it's hard or it's complicated or unnecessary, believe it or not, even if you were to do the same app in each different item and to literally code it out, what would happen is that you can reuse some of the code. You just have to kind of format it into the other side there. All right. So that is pretty much what you can expect with this course. We'll be talking about Xamarin Studio, we'll be learning how to code in C Sharp, and we'll be building apps here. Just keep in mind though that sometimes the back-end code can be used and sometimes it's hard or too complicated to use. So as long as you understand that, I'm going to pass you on to the amazing Nimish Narang, who will go through the rest of this course with you. I hope you enjoy the course.